So we have an amazing panel of folks here today to talk about public and private partnerships that actually work. And I want to start by framing this by saying that it is extremely necessary for us to move more in this direction, right? So one of the things I fully believe in, I talk about a lot, is the people-centered economy, right? When you start to think about where we are, we're in this next phase of industrial revolution for the country. You know, AI is all the talk. You have shared economy and all these different things that are going on, right? But what are the parts that are going to make sure the people are good? When you start to look at that, it's government. It's also nonprofit organizations. It's also philanthropy, right? The things that happen right now is that we're operating in silos. But what does it look like if we bring together the partnership in effective ways to make sure that we can take care of people effectively? So today's conversation is going to kind of be around that, because I think public and private partnerships have looked in different ways on different levels. And so I want to not give away the movie by doing all the talking. I want to start by having my colleagues introduce themselves as well, right? So I have today with me Sarah Ali from, it's the Kanye Foundation? Kayne Foundation, I'm sorry. This is the Kayne Foundation. I'm joking. You see it on here. I was like, nah, it's not Kanye. It looked like it though, don't it? The Kayne Foundation. Sarah Ali is a wonderful and beautiful person. I'm excited for her to introduce herself. Adam Bettino from JCOT is here. My brother from another mother, Doug Bond from Amity Foundation. Dang. I mean, where was all that energy when I said, yo, what's up, y'all? Dang. All right, well, Doug, I see we got a celebrity in the room. We got Irwin from Smart Justice. Irwin. And then yours truly, my name is Derek Steele. I am the Executive Director of the Social Justice Learning Institute. There we go. All right. In the capacity of Measure J/CFCI, I serve as the chair of the Care First Community Investment Advisory Committee. There are over 400 organizations that are getting resources by way of the work that my colleagues and I are doing together in stewarding resources by way of the county in several departments, but also the third-party administrator. We're excited to be here. So I'm going to start from my left. Ann, you could please. Is it Ann or Anna? Ann, okay. Yeah. Ann, please introduce yourself.
It's so good to be here with you all. I'm Ann Irwin. I am the founder and director of Smart Justice California. We work primarily to elect people to state and local office in California, people who will champion deep course correction in how we do criminal justice. We spend quite a bit of time, and a core part of our work is incentivizing and inspiring public officials, whether they're working at the state level in Sacramento or here locally in LA or Oakland or San Francisco or San Diego, to do the right thing when it comes to these issues. And it takes quite a bit of inspiration and some courage sauce, and the public-private partnerships can get us to that place with them. So very happy to be here.
That was a perfect modeling of how to introduce yourself. Thank you very much for being here today. My man Doug, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ann, and thank you, Derek, for being the moderator. Doug Bond, I'm the president and CEO of Amity Foundation. I'm also an alumni of Amity Foundation. Amity Foundation has been focused on community building, reentry, restoration of families, and transforming lives since the early 80s. I came to Amity as a foster child, and my parents got out of prison when we were serving probably 50 people back then. We serve about 50,000 now, and we do it in partnership with organizations like all of you in here. And I will say there's no one organization that's going to help with everything that we need for making communities safe and healing communities. We do a lot of that with public-private partnerships, and having those kind of collaborations in place to make sure that people that are coming home get the support that they need, We're in about 84 prison yards, about 8 county jails, and we have a large network of folks that are, some of which are in this room, that have been systems impacted and doing a lot of the work in the community. So appreciate you all. Thank you.
All right.
Hi all, Sarah Ali. I have the honor of serving as the managing director of the RNS Kayne Foundation. Kayne Foundation.
It's Kayne Foundation, y'all.
We are a place-based funder doing work here in Los Angeles as well as Aotearoa, New Zealand. Economic inclusion and community health is our North Star. We're really invested in supporting opportunities for young people to experience economic empowerment. I'm also proudly serving on the advisory council of Crenshaw Dairy Mart. My friends from CDM are here. Their work is rooted in ancestry, healing, and abolition. And I also serve as a board member of Dreamhaus, an organization I want to uplift for doing work to support pathways to creative career opportunities.
That is fantastic.
Hey everybody, I'm Adam Bettino. I work for the judge. But honestly, I have the tremendous privilege of overseeing all of our programs at JCOD, helping to oversee. There's a bunch of purple shirts in here. These are the folks that are doing really incredible work all the time. So thank you so much to our staff and everything that you do. Thank you for coming to this amazing day. Really excited to be, frankly, kind of honored and to be with these great thought leaders in the space and just leaders in general in this space. Excited to talk about how we can better break down silos. I've only been with JCOD for a handful of months, but I've been with the county for 15 years. This is just, my gosh, this is just a long time coming, right? This is a momentum that has been building for many, many years. It's super exciting to have us all here in this space to continue this work and to continue the momentum that we've gained. So thank you.
Are y'all ready to get into this? I say we get into this. Take your pens out. There might be some nuggets in this whole situation that you might want to take with you, right? And so I want to start off by, and this is a question to each of you. You know, public-private partnership looks different on different levels. And even in their introductions, you can hear that there are varying ways that each of the organizations are approaching the different partnerships. So can each of you give me your best example of how you approach public-private partnerships and how they have added value to your organization, right? Just for context, like I know that it may not be a new thing for many of your organizations. But for some of the organizations, it might be, right? So looking and thinking about your best example, just kind of talking about how that value add is there and why it's important. I'll start over there on the other side. We'll come this way. Yes, sir.
Best example. So like I said, I've been in the county for 15 years. I think of the last 8 months being at JCOD, there are so many ideas and thoughts, work, massive effort that is coming to fruition. We're starting to see a day like today, quite honestly. The conversations that I've been able to have just today, all the folks who are here, I think it's a silo breaking effort that, if I'm being honest, the county has just not done a very good job of historically. We have a very unique place in the county to be exactly that, to be an organization that breaks through some of these silos that we've experienced for a long time. We have partners here we work with closely who always say yes to us, which is remarkable and incredible. And I think in my past experience, one of the things that has been a struggle is kind of this ownership around the work. What we're trying to do is super hard, y'all. So hard, right? We're talking about people and decisions, behavior change, life change. For one organization to just assume that you own that work, I mean, what a fallacy, right? What a lie. So to see the effort that's been put in and to see some of this stuff come to fruition, some of the partnerships that we've been able to develop through JCOD, with, yes, CBOs, but also philanthropy and others, it's really starting to break through and breaking down those silos that we talk about, we complain about. Sometimes we use as a crutch. Honestly, that's a whole other conversation, but it has been tremendous to see just in my few months at JCOT, as I mentioned, all of this really start to come to the surface where we're really seeing some meaningful change in this space.
For sure.
I will pick up on the de-siloing. I love hearing that from you, Adam, and Derek, you mentioned that a moment ago. That is really a priority of mine. When I think about the work that I'm doing in philanthropy, it's looking at being in good relation, and to be in good relation is to recognize partnerships that make sense towards common goals. I also root this in thinking about philanthropy as a movement partner, and to be a movement partner means that we really center love, social equity, peace, regard, and through that acknowledging that there is no way we can achieve our desired outcomes unless we're coming together. It just makes sense. So when I think about, public-private partnership that's been effective or something that comes to mind, it's actually something happening right now. So I'm working to steward resources between the Mayor's Fund as well as the LA County Center for Strategic Partnerships. The catalyst sort of our activity is rooted in supporting housing and career and education opportunities for transition-age youth, And there is a need to come together and to combine our efforts. So we're doing that work right now. And in my role, it was as simple as first just setting the table, quite literally setting the table, saying, can we share a meal? Can we talk about what we're doing? Can we ensure that what we're doing isn't duplicative? Can we make sure that we're inclusive with who we bring into the conversation to ensure that we can move faster and work towards the goals that we know are so important? So that's something happening right now that I'm proud of and we need more of, and it speaks to the de-siloing.
Thank you. So I'll talk a little bit about kind of the micro and macro for public-private partnerships. I've been fortunate to be able to travel around the world and the country and look at some of the best models and some of the worst models. As Stanton Fellowship basically said, go out and look what's working and what would you bring back to LA. And that's been an incredible journey to look at some of the best things, but we already have some of the best things here in LA. I will say the state of California has an Office of Social Innovation that's focused on public-private partnerships. The county of LA has an office dedicated to public-private partnerships, and the city of LA has an office dedicated to public-private partnerships. And when you're on the micro level, for us, it was figuring out somebody that could help us get a building that's in the private sector so we could house women that were coming home from incarceration in a safe community environment. And then we needed a beautiful campus for both our women, and then we needed it for our former lifers or mentors that are coming home that have been down for 25 years or more. And we got somebody in the private sector to help us buy both those buildings. And we got government contracts to help run the services in those buildings. And so all of you, many of you do that, whether you work with a bank, whether you work with somebody that's a donor in philanthropy, people are helping out in different levels. And when you're putting government funds into a privately owned building or other private partnerships in the community, you're doing a public-private partnership. On the macro level, during the pandemic, and Ann can speak more eloquently to this because philanthropy really helped to lead a lot of the early releases for folks. When we're in the middle of the pandemic, there was about 8,000 people that the state decided they were going to reduce the population because of the pandemic. And there was no one funder or one group that could come together to do something like that. We helped coordinate to make sure that we distributed a lot of philanthropy resources that were mixed with public resources. The governor matched it. That 8,000 people turned it into 15,000 early releases and worked with 500 community-based orgs to make that happen. As we mentioned, there's just no one group that can do it alone, and you need collaboration and coordination with that. And then I'll just say, there's nothing like JCOD, frankly, anywhere I've been. There's no county department that's committed to uplifting and supporting smaller nonprofits, community-based orgs. So a lot of the grant making, a lot of the incubation academy, all those things are leading to public-private partnerships. figuring out how to build the infrastructure for individuals, getting money out quickly and equitably is unheard of, frankly. It just doesn't happen in the United States. And I haven't seen it happen actually internationally at the scale of what's happening here in LA County. So those are just some examples, I would say, of both.
For sure. Thanks, Doug.
I also want to take a minute to just, for folks who aren't familiar with Amity and Doug's work, Doug and Amity are the masters of public-private partnerships. I mean, the masters. So I feel like we should just give Doug's phone number out, and if you want some technical assistance, he's the person to call. I want to talk about what Doug was referring to, the Returning Home Well partnership. It was the summer of 2020. COVID was bearing down on California's prisons, and we were doing scenario planning. And sort of step one was, we've got to get the governor to release folks. If there's ever a moment to say, you know what, we're going to let people go home early, it's this moment, because unimaginable things could happen inside the prisons over the coming months. And so when we communicated with the governor's office and his team, the response was, well, is there anyone from the governor's office in here? Okay. The response was, well, we can't just release people, especially not now. Where are they going to go? I think his very public comment during one of his long COVID era press conferences was, I've been getting a lot of pressure to release people from prison. I'm not going to release people so they can sleep on park and bus stop benches. So this was a moment where, and this is what I really I want folks to feel empowered around, is if you're looking at a problem and you're trying to get government actors to act, and it turns out, and you think through the problem and how to solve it, and it's one where some resources at that moment could really help you, it's a really good moment to approach philanthropy and try to put together a public-private partnership. It's more complicated than that, I know, but that's just sort of, for me, the basic framing. So we said, okay, so what we're hearing from you is that you will release people if there is a place for them to go. Okay, we'll be back. So then we call Doug and we say, here's what we're trying to do. What would it take? Well, we learned that it was that, of course, housing was one thing. We also needed people to have some money. And while the network of reentry providers could find the beds and could stand up the beds, we also needed to make sure people had a stipend, a cash stipend. We went back to the governor. He said, I can't do the cash stipends, not now. It's just too controversial. The beds I can do. So we made a proposal. We said, if you cover the housing costs for letting people out, we'll come in with the other half and we'll cover the stipends, we being philanthropy. And then went to the foundations that we know care about this work and put together the money. I'm making it sound a lot easier than it was, so I don't, I'm not naive about that, but there is something about a pressing moment that can get philanthropy, which can traditionally be bogged down in process and bureaucracy. Those of you who work on the grant side of your organization know this. It can be maddening. But there's something about that moment of, we got to get people free because lives are at stake. Can you help us? And we've got a promise from the governor's office to do that if you can come up with this, and things materialize. So it's always in those moments where you feel like there's an impetus, go for it. And it's a great time to reach out to philanthropy.
Let's clap it up for that first answer. Seriously. Let me ask a question to the audience really quickly. Raise your hand if you represent or are part of a nonprofit organization or a government entity or philanthropy. Raise your hand. Okay, got you. Hands up, hands up, hands up. All right. Keep your hand up if you are in charge of your organization's public-private relationship, like with the government or with a philanthropic organization. Okay. Keep your hand up if you feel like the relationship makes it easy. Okay, see? I got you, right? And I want to speak to that. Thank you. You can put your hands down. Thank you very much for the crowd participation. Because you kind of hit the nail on the head with this. It is effective, right? But it's not easy. Right, so I want to speak a little bit about the challenges that kind of come with it. Like, what are some of the things that we're running into that if you could rethink the example that you gave, if you could redo that, what are some of the things you would approach differently because they were challenging on the back end that you had to work through? Like, how would you do that differently? Anyone can answer.
Jump in because worked a lot on that effort, and I'll say, first, the emergency. I mean, we were able to raise $36 million in 2 months, which is unheard of. Meet with 58 different sheriffs, 58 different probation chiefs, 58 different county CEOs, 58 different health directors for local health services and state parole offices throughout the state. I don't know if anything at that magnitude had happened, frankly, with the state and local government entities. If we had the same urgency that we had during the pandemic, we'd frankly be in a whole other place right now. And I think we need to keep that level of urgency to bring people home and bring people home with the support they need. That was the benefit of it. I think some of the complexity of what it even took, we had to get board motions passed to accept money from philanthropy. Which was interesting, and it's part of the dynamic. I think that's where things like JCOD are so unique. Is you have a vehicle now and a department that's set up to frankly do that, where you don't have that in the other 57 counties throughout the state of California. And so, working between departments and government is always challenging. But I think nonprofits are often the glue and the connector between government entities. And as Adam mentioned, it's got to be a solution-based approach. There's no one entity that's going to do all this. All of us collectively make those partnerships happen. And it's got to be a collaboration with government agencies because there's incredible people. Look at all the folks that are in here in purple shirts and that are committed to this, frankly. There are a lot of good people that work in government. There are a lot of good people that work in nonprofit entities. And there's a lot of good citizens and community members that just want to be helpful. But we have to give them the kind of the hope and the pathway to do so.
Mm-hmm. Here on that. Here on that. Anyone else can hop in on the same question?
Just quickly, and I want to speak, I think, about the relationship that we're building with philanthropy at the moment. And yes, there is a Center for Public-Private Partnerships that's done a lot of work in this area. As we ventured out into it as JCOD, a lot of people have said to me, if you talk to one organization, you talk to one organization. So the struggle then becomes, hey, we're doing this cool work. Yeah, we want to help you, but we only serve left-handed people, right? Things like that. And I'm not saying that conversation ever happened. That didn't happen. Obviously, it's a joke. But there's like very specific and narrow pathways sometimes to the partnership part of it, which, again, what I think we're modeling here through JCOD and through all these other partnerships is kind of the opposite of that. And Derek, I know you're moderating, but you do an incredible amount of work with the Community Advisory Committee to be the opposite of that, right? To expand pathways for folks, to bring people to the table, to bring awareness to the amazing work that's happening, right? All of the grantees, hundreds of people that are out there doing amazing work, plus those that we've been able to stand up through the Incubation Academy. It's 137, got it. Plus, the latest cohort. There's just I think the challenge has always been like, it feels like a narrow gate a lot of times when we speak to different organizations. What we've been able to do is start to broaden those things a little bit more, and that just creates great opportunity.
And I think a lot of that is also like dealing with precedents, right? There, in many ways, to what you said, Doug, and as well as you said, Adam, there's not a lot of precedents for the things we're trying to actually pull together with a lot of these public-private partnerships that are being developed now, right? So yeah, when you're at the beginning of that, it feels very narrow. But then as you get better at it, it gets broader and broader and broader, so please, sir.
I love this conversation because I think it does create an opportunity to create a model to do things differently and have a really expansive approach to what philanthropy can do in strong partnerships. So as you're talking, I'm reminded of a conversation I had with Jason Foster at Destination Crenshaw. And yes, the work is about building a beautiful public art space, but it's also about creating a playbook for other community organizations to learn from and replicate, to think about what you can do when you braid together multiple resources. So I'm here to push my colleagues to say, when you say these are your issue areas, step back and think about your big picture. What is it that you're driving towards? For the Kayne Foundation, it's a beloved community. It's a community where we all feel whole. We have what we need, and we feel good, and we feel like we can be together. It sounds like, call it what you will, but it's rooted in love. And so this idea, if you hold that big picture, then look at the open ways to get to that. So I encourage grant seekers, be open, and to Doug's point, seize those moments when you have a great idea. The time is now, and I'm open to those conversations, and I know that many of my colleagues are too.
I want to drop into the conversation sort of a caution here, which is that philanthropy should not be charged with taking care of people's basic needs. That is the job of the government. No, all of the countries that we would consider kind of our cousins from a cultural or a political standpoint, they don't ask for people to go out and do bake sales in order to donate the money and take care of people's basic needs. They see the government as being responsible for that, and we need to hold the government to that here. So for me, the public-private partnerships should, when they're funded by philanthropy, in my mind, always have an eye toward a handoff so that we are incubating an idea, we are incubating an endeavor, we are providing that seed funding, that risk-taking seed funding, but that ultimately the government will take it and run with it. And so otherwise, we can't let the state or local government think that, in the case of justice, that we're in charge of, we'll foot the bill for incarcerating and caging people. And then you all, philanthropy, you guys are in charge of helping them get well and on their feet when they get home. No. That's the job also of the government. So when thinking about the public-private partnerships, thinking about it as something that we are trying to inspire government actors, public officials, decision makers who hold the purse strings to the state and local governments to ultimately take this on as their own endeavor. I'll give you an example if I can.
Yeah, please.
So speaking of international, we've so many people in this room. I'm standing on the shoulders of some of the wise warriors that are in this room and gracing this space, not to mention the inspiration from all the people who have come home. But we have all been banging our heads collectively about how we incarcerate people and the brutalizing nature of the prison system. And so we thought, let's maybe take a delegation of California public officials to go see another model. Because, how can you work towards something that you can't even imagine? You've never seen it in your lifetime. So we brought a bunch of legislators and the Secretary of the Department of Corrections, wardens, undersecretaries, governor staff to Norway. Now, not so that they could be like, oh, this is great, let's go home and make better prisons. Norway is actually 90% along the way to abolition. They incarcerate per capita about a tenth of the the percentage of people that we do here in California. So it's both a decarceral model and a completely different way of approaching how you hold people accountable. The only way I could get those people to go to Norway and see another system was through a public-private partnership. There was no way CDCR was going to pay for their people to go to Norway. So philanthropy had to step in and say, hey, you guys want to go to Norway? And so that's an example of using those kind of private dollars to get people somewhere where they wouldn't go, somewhere they wouldn't see, with the idea that they'll come back and think, okay, maybe we can do this differently, and start to do that. And you got to be persistent. We take delegations now every year, every 2 years, and that still, the trips to Norway will be funded by philanthropy. But all with an eye toward inspiring the people who decide how we hold people accountable here in California.
I received that fully, and I think just a couple things to add to it. Here, I think nonprofit organizations today are even reframing our position and what role we play in the people-centered work that we do, right? Because I think in many ways, government having the feeling of full responsibility in the way that you're talking about provides them creating programs that are clunky, that do not necessarily as nimble as they need to be, that are not as responsive to the needs of folks as well. And so I love the pivot point of the purse strings piece, right? Because I think the responsibility of collecting the taxes from all of us and how we want to see those dollars invested in our communities, from in LA County, big LA, I like to call it, from a care first standpoint, where we're not even having a conversation about like increasing or the carceral state, but really digging our heels into the idea of how we really care for people in a real way. And I think every single day, nonprofits who have the resources and even the ones that don't do what they can to make sure that we're taking care of people effectively. So I think the threading of these things together between the three major parts of the sector of that care for people working together, we can craft a public-private partnership in a way that it really has never even been done before, not even just here in this country, but maybe even around the world, right? Like how people can actually dive into it. So just in that same vein, right? If you wanted to leave folks with something that you lead with when you come to developing these partnerships and what you're thinking about, what would that one or two things be that you want to make sure people carry? And this is the part that, like, as you had your pens out, this is like the one you really want to write down, of like something to keep in mind when you're developing the partnerships for yourself, because we got different varying levels of folks in here, right? You got people who are $1 million or less in the work that they're doing. You have more established foundations. You have mid-sized organizations that are kind of in the tween stage where their pants are high-watered, but they can't get they can't get the emerging dollars from philanthropy for new programs because they're too big. But they also aren't big enough to get the big contracts from the government either. So trying to figure it out. But then you also got the more established Amity Foundations on the table too. So what are the things from your differing levels of this that you're thinking about that you want to impart into the conversation as to things to be thinking about for this?
Derek, I think you're making fun of my pants right now. But
nah, bro.
I love you to death. I'll say a couple things, and I would just really listen to what Ann mentioned right now. I'll say with Returning Home Well, there is a parallel path, and now that is in state funding. And so while it started with a public-private investment from philanthropy, while that was still going on, figuring out the bills within the budget to pay for Returning Home Well. Now that is a permanent $10 million a year program that is added on to help support hundreds of community-based orgs. And I just want to emphasize how important it is when we talk to philanthropy that it is not a permanent fix. Philanthropy is not the sustainable funding source for everything in the community. And so when we're talking to donors or funders, there has to be more sustainable pathways to doing that. I think it's something that I always think about in terms of being able to test and pilot. That's what it should be created for, is we're gonna test, pilot, evaluate, research, and that's where departments like JCOD have been birthed out of, Office of Diversion and Reentry have been birthed out of. You have entire government agencies that now have been created. And I think when we think about some of our government agencies, some are decades old, long before a lot of the things that we're doing now. When you think about HUD, Department of Labor, a lot of the things at the federal level, they were never designed to help people coming home from incarceration. So we have to think of how do we change policy. I'll just say the other important part is there has to be a policy track and thinking about how the policies, because you all know what gets in your way. You're all the experts, frankly. You know better than anybody else. Anyone that's in a position of authority or power with government, more of what gets in your way. That's exactly right. So you all know how to navigate the change. You also know the solutions of what needs to be fixed. So I think being an honest voice to government as a partner and not being critical or not being adversarial, there's a way to have that conversation. I think that solution focused, that things get in government's way as well. We always ask what gives in our way. I always try to sit down with folks in government agencies and understand what gets in their way as well, because you all have a voice that frankly they don't. And you can help them to reduce some of the barriers that frankly impact all of us collectively.
Man, so he said, be ready to advocate for change with policy, right? He also said that you have to be, it was, the policy piece really got me because the advocacy part, I got a thought on. But you're also talking about not collaboration. I missed it. Test, evaluation. That's what I was thinking. Thank you very much. Evaluation, key critical piece of the puzzle. Even with the old agencies that you were talking about, the ones that have been around for a long time, I would wonder how they're doing evaluation, right? How are they getting better and improving the ways that they can make sure that we're taking care of people as they're coming back home too. So, right, evaluation is a key piece. So if you are doing this work, I saw all the hands are representing organizations, you should ask the question, how are we evaluating the level of success? And are we willing to let go of things that are not working? Because there's no reason to keep doing it if it ain't working, right? And that's on all levels, government, philanthropy, and nonprofits. Like, we have to make sure that we are being very thoughtful about the end game that we're trying to achieve, which making sure that people can live these whole, free, thriving lives. How are we mapping ourselves toward that end? So thank you very much for bringing it back up for me. I appreciate you. That was Doug. I appreciate you, Doug. Anyone else that want to add to that, please?
Yeah, this raises something I think really important around advocating. And let me just go back. Just building off of what Doug said, when you have an endeavor that you want to take on and you realize having some private funding would help, being ready to go to philanthropy, going to funders with a story of how the funding you're asking for is unlocking something bigger, and tell that whole story. And if you can also throw in there, and so much of it is aspirational, that is fine. If you can also throw in there that while you are doing this and executing this public-private partnership in a parallel way, you are advocating for the permanent funding stream from the government entity, even better for philanthropy, right? That's like a beautiful thing. That just helps with get over risk aversion, for example, or the idea that why are we paying for something that really should be a government undertaking? So that's my advice. And then on the piece around advocating, there's a lot of money at the county level. There's big money at the state level. And one of the things that I think is one of the structural kind of tragedies of how California was set up, where the biggest county by far, the biggest population center, is so far from Sacramento. Let me ask, how many people in this room have been up to Sacramento to advocate for either bills or budget plays, right? Trying to get money from the state government. Okay, I want to come back next year. I want to ask the same question. Go to Sacramento. Because you know who is in Sacramento and filling the halls and filling the hearing rooms of the budget committee or the public safety committee when they're weighing in on bills?
The lobbyists.
The lobbyists. And those lobbyists are with police unions and prison guards unions, sheriffs unions, and they are there and they are present, and it shows up in how money is allocated by the state. It shows up in what bills are passed or not passed. Get to Sacramento. And also, this is a great example. You think, well, how the hell am I going to get to Sacramento? That's far. Bring a big group. That is a great thing to ask certain philanthropists for, right? They got to be willing to fund lobbying, or there's other ways to
or community education.
Or community education. But seriously, if you want to get to Sacramento and you want to bring a group to Sacramento, resources should not be the hurdle. We can overcome that. Really, reach out to me and we will talk about how to overcome that. We need everyone in this room in Sacramento to be walking those halls, filling those rooms. It will unlock state resources and state policy change.
Received. Please,
I agree with everything that's been said, and especially going back to Anne's previous point around recognizing the role of private philanthropy in seeding opportunity, being catalytic to move future resources. But I'm also thinking about very real examples when you asked us to think about, imparting some gems, some things that will fuel your work. I'm thinking about an organization that was successful in receiving federal funds, but the timing of those federal dollars meant that bridge funding was incredibly necessary. They had a beautiful project that resonated with a congresswoman that was stewarding these resources. It was successful, but the timing was such where the project was stalled because there wasn't bridge funding lined up. That's something philanthropy can do. Philanthropy can probably do a better job of this. I'm representing a small family foundation, but this is where we do our work in collaboration, in partnership. So when things like this come to me, I think about, well, who else can I talk to? Who else is out there that we can link with who will ensure that a project that has legs can continue to move?
That's fantastic, because I think I want to give a shout out to the California Community Foundations and also the efforts of Liberty Hill Foundation, who are standing in and ready to actually be third-party administrators, for those resources to take on the hard part of the work so that the resources can just flow to the nonprofits for them to just go ahead and do their work. Those are like first people into the door to try to set up how this can look. Amity Foundation being one of them as well, with the work that you're doing with the Care First Community investment. But those parts are needed so that the people who are really just ready to just do the work can just do that without having to worry about all the regulatory pieces that are coming through because philanthropy stepped in to actually be the ones to be in the way for that.
I would just say, and again, all of these thoughts, it really is a privilege to be with you all and just talking through this. It's a conversation. We probably talk about this for like 5 hours. I would say as kind of the county person on the panel, don't stop pushing us. I mean, Judge Armstead is doing enough pushing for all of us, especially those of us as JCOD can understand and appreciate that. But like one of the things that she models so well is she gets us to yes. So it's almost never no. And Doug models this really well, and his team feels my pain, I know you do, because we're just constantly doing a lot, right? We're constantly doing, but you all in this room, our other partners, you got to keep pushing us. And when I say us, I kind of just mean like the county in general, government in general, because we don't know what we don't know. We really do, I think, share a vision and a mission. That's one of the beautiful things about a day like today is we can come together under that shared mission. We might not always agree about how to get there, but the why is pretty consistent, I would say. So you guys just have to keep pushing us and driving us. I love the advocacy, that call to advocacy, both at the state and the county level. There is a moment, this has been shared today, right? We're in this moment. There's things on the ballot that are kind of spooky and scary, to be totally honest, right? Like, we don't know what's gonna happen in the coming months. And so we really need to solidify the amazing work that's happened just in a couple of years, right? We wanna solidify, we wanna keep that pushing. We're relying on you guys as much as we possibly can because JCOD's just over 100 people. We have amazing partnerships with some big and some small organizations. You all have to keep pushing government, have to keep pushing us to be making the right decision with resources and energy.
Let's clap it up for the panel. I'm gonna keep it a buck. When they told me what the focus was for the panel, I was like, oh, that's the wonkiest panel that you can, right? Because, but I think being able to really get to the heart of it, of what we're trying to achieve, and I know we didn't cover it all. We didn't get to even talking about some of the implications from a racial equity standpoint about who gets resources, who doesn't. We haven't gotten to the point of like the challenges of the rigidness of government in a way that they want to see things done, and what audits can do to change in the way that you even do your work. And there's a whole bunch that we can kind of get into about the hardest parts about the public-private partnership. But I think because of the types of conversations that are being had based on what my colleagues kind of shared, we're working to really smooth the rough edges so that we can really move together in solidarity to really get the work done on behalf of the people. So I think this is to be continued. This is not an end of the conversation. There's definitely more to be had, and I would love to come back to continue the conversation next year at the next summit that is done. But clap it up again one more time for my colleagues.